think discussions are getting too remote. I think you got to identify these Archons as being close, as being really right near you. And these Archons are very close. They're everywhere, and they paralyze in little ways. They're mind walls, or they're mind ascriptions of value where there is no value. When a freshman becomes a senior on a football team or whatever, it's always a little bit of a mind fart for them to realize that they're just as good as the seniors were before them, because they had viewed the seniors in a different way as having more value. And the value they placed upon these seniors was an Archon, or you could say that they had a mental wall that they could not be as good as the seniors. Either way you want to say that. And so these Archons are everywhere. Pepsi and RC Cola are just about identical. If one day Pepsi and RC Cola just swapped formulas, or the contents of all the Pepsi cans and the RC Cola cans just magically switched places, nobody would be able to tell except maybe a few freaks. However, people are convinced to pay more for Pepsi, because they do. That's why Pepsi sells for more. Why do they do this? Is it because they have genuinely thought it through and come to the conclusion that Pepsi is better than RC Cola? No, they're just going with the senior, with the product that they ascribe value to, or they could say they have a mental wall that RC Cola cannot be as good as Pepsi. I always viewed advertising as a little bit shady, but I could never really say why. Advertising causes a person to pay more for an equivalent product that is not advertised, paying more for Pepsi than for RC Cola. And this effect is achieved by spending money on everything that goes into making an ad. And those ads, of course, would not be made if not for the intended effect of raising the equilibrium price of their product. And if there were no ads, then consumers would have more money to spend on other things, and those resources would be allocated to endeavors that would actually create more wealth in the long run, instead of tricking consumers to spend more money on Pepsi, which then just goes to advertisements, which does not increase the production of capital. Advertising is an inefficiency caused by the greed to achieve a brand name, or an Archon status such as Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Nike, which can then be exploited. In this way, one can see the state as one giant advertising campaign that Pepsi couldn't even dream of emulating. I see the state as a psychological pyramid scheme. The state convinces people its services are necessary, but its propaganda is not good enough to get them to buy these things voluntarily, and so it must pyramid on top of that the violent enforcement, but convinces people that it is not violently enforced. It's like how central banks pyramid $10,000 on top of $10. The state pyramids violent enforcement of services on top of the belief that those services are necessary, on top of the actual value of those services. $10 to $100 to $1,000, etc., etc. This is the result of an advertising campaign that begins with parental authority being projected onto the state, on the government, and is accelerated through government education camps. It's no mistake that the World War broke out after the major powers established public education systems. When someone sees a country, a race, or a person get revealed as something other than they thought, and they are heartbroken, that is because they place value in an Archon. The Archon is always false. If a race you liked is breeding itself out, well, then you shouldn't have put value on that race in the first place. That value on the race was an Archon. When a country is behaving in a way you didn't think it would, well, then you shouldn't have placed value on that country in the first place. These mind values and mind walls are mini-states. I don't think it's necessary to break down all of these mini-Archons to achieve political anarchy, but a mentality that doesn't accept Archons and asks these simple questions that can be difficult to ask, such as, is taxation a death threat? Having people like that couldn't hurt.